What's going on, guys? Ben from JK Gear and Gadgets.
Hey, and Cassie.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the first episode of a new video series. So in this episode, we are taking a look at what V8 I have sitting here beside me.
What Jeep are we going to put the V8 in?
And we're going to talk about why we are choosing that Jeep to put this engine in. Wait, did I say that wrong?
Well, why are we choosing that Jeep to put the engine in?
Okay, the Jeep's not going in the engine.
Wait, what? I don't even know
Why
what
we're
to say.
choosing to put this engine in that Jeep. Let's get started. So before we start talking about the engine itself and which Jeep we're gonna put it in, let's give you guys a little backstory on each individual Jeep and kind of the build plans for it. So most of you guys know that the channel started off with the JK. This thing has, so many upgrades, since we first got it.
Yep.
This is a 2010 with a 3.8 liter V6 engine. Now, we luckily do have the 6-speed manual transmission, which definitely helps out a lot because the 3.8 is kind of a dog. Now, we also added 40s, 1-tons, and a ton of other accessories. This Jeep is starting to get pretty heavy, and it's definitely not the fastest Jeep in the fleet. Next up, we have Cassie's LJ. This has the 4.0. So many people love that engine. It definitely has good power, good torque. The only issue with the LJ is the fact that it has the 4-speed automatic transmission, the 42 RLE. And it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. So the engine on this is pretty powerful, especially for a two-door. The transmission just really sucks. Pair that with some 35s, it's not exactly the fastest either. Now over here we have the 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. A lot of people love putting V8s in this, and I can see why, because this thing would be a very, very fun Jeep to drive around with a V8. It's a Jeep truck. Why does it not have a V8? I asked myself the same questions. So we have 3 Jeeps that could all use a V8 swap. Which one are we gonna choose? We'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the engine itself, because that kind of leads to our decision.
Yeah.
So we have right here a V8. Now, which V8 is this? A lot of people, you're looking at it, like, oh, that looks like an LS.
But
what is it? This is a 5.3 LM7. So this is a Gen 3. Some people would call this an LS. Technically, it is not an LS engine. It is an LM7. For the purpose of this video series, we will refer to this as an LS because it's still a GMC Chevy based LS engine. It's just the LM7 5.3. Now, we're going to talk about the numbers on this. I guess we should go ahead and do that.
go for it.
But we'll come back to this in a minute. So let's take a look at some numbers. We already said what engine this is. Let's take a look at some of the specs. So the LM7 5.3 Gen 3 engine is found in 99 to 07. Chevy trucks, GMCs, their SUVs, all that stuff. And they literally made millions of these engines. Millions. They're very, very good.
Millions and millions
a lot of them. You can find these online in junkyards. They are all over. It's a very common engine. Now, what is the good thing about this engine? It puts out 285 horsepower stock, 325 foot-pounds of torque stock. There are a bunch of very easy power upgrades that we can do to this. Like, we can throw a cam in there, we can freaking turbocharge it, supercharge it, the list, it just goes on and on. Now, for the transmission, paired with this engine, has the 4L60E, which we have laying right there. I did buy this engine, but bought it locally. Came with the engine, transmission, and transfer case. Bought it for 800 bucks.
And that was an accident. Like, we were looking, but we weren't looking.
We weren't really looking, but it was 800 bucks for all that. I've already sold the transfer case for 100 bucks, so we are in the swap so far 700 bucks, which is not bad. But back to what we were talking about. The transmission is a 4L60E. Now what that means is it's a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now that we know kind of the specs on this engine, let's take a look at the specs on the other Jeeps that we have. So the LJ, we're on 35s right now, possibly 37s in the future. We have an automatic 4-speed as well, the 42 RLE. The engine itself is the 4.0 inline 6, 190 horsepower, and 235 foot-pounds of torque. So if we compared the 4.0 to this 5.3, we would pretty much gain about 100 horsepower and pretty close to 100 foot-pounds of torque. That's quite an upgrade for a two-door Jeep. Plus, we're probably gonna be able to bump these numbers up an extra 60 horsepower, another 40 foot-pounds of torque. So that would be a very, very impressive upgrade. Now for the JK, we have 1 tons 40s, 6-speed transmission, and the 3.8 liter V6. We're pumping out 205 horsepower and 240 foot-pounds of torque. Both of those numbers are definitely not that impressive, especially when we compare them to the 4.0. You know, so the JK is putting out like 15 more horsepower and 5 more foot-pounds of torque.
Looking at it written down.
Yeah, and then you look at the differences between the Jeeps. You're like, man, that little thing and that big thing, there's a little bit of difference in the modifications, which means there should be quite a bit of a difference in the horsepower and torque. Now we're gonna move over here to the 3.6. This is gonna be for you JK guys with the 3.6 Pentastar, 280 horsepower.
You JT guys?
No, this is the JK. 3.6,
sorry.
and then 255 foot-pounds of torque. Now, when they did the same Pentastar in the JL and JT, they bumped it up to 285 horsepower and then 260 pounds of torque. So about 5 extra horsepower for you JL and JT owners. But as you can tell, the 3.6 numbers are pretty close in regards to horsepower. We have 285 on the 5.3 and 280 here on the 3.6. The big thing is the torque goes up from 255 to 325. So the 5.3 might not be the best swap for those of you with the 3.6. And
So
the Gladiator
out.
has the 3.6. That is out. If we're gonna do all this work to put a V8 in there, that baby better be putting out a lot bigger numbers than this 5.3 does. So now we're narrowed down to the LJ or JK. What are we gonna do? Let's talk about that real quick. So the LJ definitely would be an easier V8 swap. There's not as much electronics to worry about. We don't have the computer running everything. It's a very, very basic Jeep that we can throw the V8 in. Now for the JK, I'd say the JK needs the V8 swap more than the LJ does. But the JK V8 swaps lead to a little, I mean, honestly, it's a little bit harder. We have to worry about the computers. We have to worry about, you know, the computer on this Jeep controls everything. Our headlights, our turn signals, all of that stuff, where the LJ doesn't. So this is gonna be a little more expensive of a swap compared to the LJ. Now, which one are we gonna do? JK guys, do not leave this video yet. We are doing the swap on the LJ for a few reasons. First off, the 5.3 liter V8 is better suited for the LJ.
Yep.
The JK, if we're gonna spend all this money on the swap, I would recommend at a minimum doing a 6.0 or bigger, because we're gonna want a little more than 300 something horsepower in a JK on 40s and 1 tons. If we're gonna put all this money into a swap, why not get an engine that we can bump those numbers up a lot higher than that and really make this thing feel like it has a V8. We're gonna put this 5.3 in the LJ, and this thing is gonna be, it's gonna be a little rocket ship. It's gonna be awesome. But JK guys, don't leave. Like I just said, you're probably like, Ben, why am I gonna keep watching if you're not even doing this swap
And Ben, why are we
on
doing
the
the LJ
LJ?
first? Why didn't we buy a
Yeah, why
V8
didn't we
with
buy a
6.0?
V8 with the 6.0? Because they're everywhere around here.
Yeah.
That is happening right after this swap, guys. So here's what we are going to do for the video, like kind of the video series. We're gonna start off this series doing it for the LJ. The main reason for that is because everything that we're gonna do to this engine and do to the LJ are gonna be the same steps as for the JK. The JK is just gonna require extra steps once the engine's in there. So in this first video series, we're not only doing stuff on my channel, we're gonna have Cassie's channel doing some videos. Her channel's Jeep Gear and Gadgets, so go check it out. What was that?
Get some on your
Oh, I thought you were just rubbing me because you loved me.
I love you. I'll go.
So all of the basic stuff we're gonna cover in this first video series. You know, we're gonna clean up the engine, we're gonna tear it down. This is a junkyard engine with kind of, I mean, unknown miles. The guy said it had like 130,000 miles, but who knows, this thing might have like 300,000 miles. It might not run, it might smoke like crazy, and maybe he just wanted to sell it and completely lied to me. So we're gonna have to tear down the engine, check all the internals, replace everything as needed, and then we are gonna do a few power upgrades, so maybe slap a cam in there, do some really cool stuff, and then of course comes the part where we have to put the engine in. So weld in new motor mounts, figure out what kind of wiring harness we're gonna go with, what computer, how we're gonna make our transmission mount, what radiator we're using. All of that small stuff will kind of finish the swap on the LJ, whereas the JK, that's just the beginning. Then you have to focus on how are we gonna make this thing run in the JK that's so computer controlled. So when it comes time to do the video series on the JK with a bigger engine, we can kind of still run over that stuff, but we're not gonna go as far in depth, and we can really focus on the JK specific stuff and instead of trying to talk about all the basic V8 swap info and the JK specific stuff. So you guys will see what we're talking about once this starts going, but this swap is about to begin. We have a lot of parts to buy. We have a lot of time that's gonna have to be spent tearing this engine apart and whatnot, but I think a lot of you guys are really, really gonna love this series. It's gonna be a lot of fun. We're not gonna go too far in depth. I know the JK 1-ton axle swap video, we went pretty far in depth. You know, like, oh, how to replace your ring gear, how to re-gear your axles, all that stuff. You know, when it's time to tear apart this engine, we're not gonna spend 20 minutes showing you guys how to inspect your rod bearings and replace them.
Because this engine, there's millions and there are tons of videos already on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
that are very specific to that, and I don't think you guys need that from us. It's out there.
Yeah.
Already.
And there's better people that can tell you how to rebuild this 5.3 than me. Like, you know, I probably could, but I mean, I could tell you how to do it, but there's already designated videos exactly for everything you would need to know on this engine itself.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be a lot of fun. This is gonna be a great swap. The LJ is gonna be a complete beast when we're done.
So sick.
And I'm jealous, but guys,
it'll prepare Ben to give you guys an even better video series on the
JK.
swap that he's going to do
on the JK. And literally once this thing is in the Jeep, the hunt for a 6.0 begins to start this swap. Plus, another reason we're not putting a 5.3 into the JK is because of the transmission. I know a lot of you guys at this point probably have already left a comment on the 4L60. It is not the best transmission. It's, you know, its maximum torque rating, I think, is 360 foot-pounds of torque, and this engine puts out 325, so it's kind of up in the threshold. Those 4L60s, you know, they were used in some Silverados, Yukons, kind of the SUVs and trucks, and they were known to take a huge crap. They're not the best transmission. So we put it in an LJ, it's gonna be able to handle a lighter weight vehicle. We put that transmission in this heavy JK where it's gonna see a lot of abuse. That transmission's not gonna last too long. So that's where, you know, the 6.0 and the 6L80 transmission's gonna come into play. Plus that's a 6-speed transmission compared to the 4-speed. So you get the 4-speed, I'll take the 6-speed. It's gonna be a fun video swap, guys. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are too. And plus, we're still gonna have other videos in between this.
Yes.
It's not, you know, the next 10 videos are not gonna be only LS swap videos. I'm actually working on a bolt-on power upgrades for all 3 Jeeps. You know, for those of you that aren't interested in doing a V8 swap, we have some other little special goodies for you guys coming soon. And I definitely feel like I forgot to mention something. Everybody loves V8s. So hopefully this video series will kind of show you guys what goes into the swap if you want to do it here at home, in your driveway, in your garage. It's not going to be
your carport
or your carport. It's not going to be that hard to do this swap. And you know, I see so many people out just spending $30,000.
It breaks my heart.
$30,000 something dollars, you know, getting a V8 put in their Jeep. For those of you that can't afford to do that and you want to do that, that is awesome.
Yeah, sure.
I am happy for you. I'd love to do that because you drop your Jeep off, you have no problems, boom, you come back with a V8. But I know there's a ton of you out there that, you know, are never going to be able to drop $30,000 instantly on a shop to V8 swap your Jeep. But maybe you're like me and you don't mind spending, I got sweat in my eyes.
You're pretty disgusting right now.
Oh, it is hot here in Texas. But I know there's a lot of you out there like me who have the time to do it. Even if you don't know how to do it, if you're willing to learn, do some research, I think we can get this done, at least in the LJ, for under $5,000. I just set our budget. We are going to LS swap, or 5.3 swap, the LJ for $5,000. So what does that mean for the JK? We're going to have to add at least another
5,000.
I think for the JK, when we get around to that point, my budget goal is $8,000. Yeah. Think we can do it for $8,000? And that's like a good swap. We're not doing any like backyard stuff, like putting a Silverado dash in the Jeep or anything. Like, we're gonna make it look nice, guys. Now we just have to figure out how to get this back in the garage. There we go. It's a pretty boring video. Should we go wheeling?
Still wheeling.
Let's go wheeling real quick. At least have a few minutes of
How are we're taking that?
Yeah. So the main reason everybody's out here is one of his buddies picked up that little buggy, 2-for-1 deal. He traded a, what, TJ, right? Traded a 1-ton TJ for 2 buggies. So they're out here playing with it, checking clearances, testing everything out. So definitely seems like a nice little flex spot up in here. We're gonna have to try it out. Whoa, yeah. Oh yeah. So we've been out here for a little while. It's been a lot of fun. Got to test drive the new buggy a little bit, or test ride. I didn't drive it. I really do want to drive it though. Cassie's driving now. We're gonna have a little more fun, hit a few more spots with these people, but overall it's been a good day.
Yeah.
Got a little trail time in, nothing crazy, but hope you guys enjoyed the video. As you can tell, we have a lot of projects coming up. The V8 swaps are gonna be a lot of fun, and you know, we're still gonna do a bunch of other videos in between those videos. We got a lot coming up, and hopefully we'll be hitting some more trails soon. So like always, guys, please give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment below on what you want to see next, and until next time, see you later.